The fertility clinic bills arrived on a Tuesday morning, buried in our shared insurance inbox like a landmine waiting for the right footstep. I found them while Cleo buttered her toast, humming something off-key that scraped my nerves raw. "Interesting reading material," I said, setting my laptop screen toward her. The billing notice glowed between us like evidence in a courtroom. Cleo glanced up, and for just a moment, her face went blank. Then she shrugged with the casual indifference of someone discussing the weather. "It's not my fault you can't have children," she said, taking another bite of toast. "That's why I asked my ex for help." The words hung in the kitchen air like smoke from a grease fire. I stared at my wife of 6 years, this woman who'd shared my bed, my bank account, my life, and felt something cold settle in my chest where warmth used to live. "Derek Walsh," I said. It wasn't a question. "He was willing to help when you couldn't." Her voice carried that particular tone she used when explaining why she'd bought another designer handbag we couldn't afford. Reasonable, justified, completely detached from reality. I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because the alternative was screaming. And screaming wouldn't accomplish what needed accomplishing. Instead, I opened my phone and navigated to our joint checking account. "What are you doing?" Cleo asked, finally looking up from her breakfast. "Problem solving," I said, fingers dancing across the screen. "Account frozen. Credit card suspended. Automatic transfers canceled." "You know me, always the practical one." Her fork clattered against her plate. "Jared, what the hell?" "Language, sweetheart." I scrolled through my contacts, found the name I'd hoped never to need. Mitchell Reeves, divorce attorney, came highly recommended by 3 guys from my construction crew who'd learned the hard way that preparation beats panic every time. The phone rang twice before a crisp voice answered. Reeves Law Office. "This is Jared Sollace. We spoke 6 months ago about retainer options. I'd like to move forward immediately." Cleo's eyes went wide. She started to speak, but I held up one finger, the universal sign for, "Let me finish this call first, then you can have your meltdown." "Yes, sir, Mr. Sollace. I have your file right here. When would you like to come in?" "This afternoon, if possible. I have documentation ready." "Excellent. 2 o'clock work for you?" "Perfect." I ended the call and looked at my wife, who was staring at me like I just announced plans to burn down the house. "You can't be serious," she whispered. "Serious." I pulled up the insurance portal again, scrolling through months of carefully archived statements. "Want to see something interesting? These clinic visits you've been making? They line up perfectly with the days you said you were visiting Lila or having lunch with Monica." Cleo's face went pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. "You've been tracking me?" "I've been paying attention. There's a difference?" I turned the laptop toward her again, showing the consent form she'd signed. "Notice anything missing from these documents?" She leaned forward, squinting at the screen. I watched her face change as she realized what wasn't there. "My name," I said helpfully. "Funny thing about fertility clinics. They're pretty careful about getting both spouses to sign off on procedures. Unless, of course, only one spouse knows about them." "Jared, listen." "Oh, I'm listening. I've been listening for months. Every late-night work meeting, every weekend girls' trip, every time you came home smelling like cologne that definitely wasn't mine." I closed the laptop with a soft click. "I'm a construction project manager, Cleo. I notice when things don't line up." She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the kitchen tiles. "You're overreacting. This isn't what you think." "Really?" "Because what I think is that my wife decided to have another man's baby without bothering to mention it to her husband. What I think is that she's been lying to my face for months while spending our money on a fantasy that doesn't include me." I kept my voice level, conversational. "Please, correct me if I'm wrong." Cleo opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. "It's complicated." "No, it's really not." I stood and walked to the kitchen counter where she'd left her purse. "Mind if I borrow this? I want to show Mr. Reeves the receipts you've been keeping." "You can't just—" She lunged for the purse, but I was already moving toward the front door. "I can, and I am. The house is in both our names, but the mortgage payments come from an account you no longer have access to. The car you drive is registered to me. The credit cards you love so much, also mine." I paused at the door, looking back at her. "You want to call Derek? Go ahead. But do it from somewhere else." "Jared, wait." But I was already outside, breathing the crisp Maine morning air and feeling lighter than I had in months. Behind me, I could hear Cleo shouting my name, but I didn't turn around. I had an appointment to keep and a life to reclaim. The drive to Mitchell Reeves's office took 20 minutes through downtown Portland's morning traffic. I used the time to organize my thoughts and review the evidence I'd been collecting since the first time I'd noticed Derek's car parked 2 blocks from our house on a day when Cleo claimed to be shopping alone. I'm not a suspicious person by nature. I build things for a living, commercial projects mostly, the kind of work that requires trust, precision, and attention to detail. You learn to spot problems before they become disasters, to read the signs when something's about to collapse. My marriage had been showing stress fractures for over a year. Mitchell Reeves looked exactly like a man who'd spent 20 years dissolving other people's mistakes. Silver-haired, sharp-eyed, with the kind of handshake that suggested he'd seen everything and been surprised by none of it. "Mr. Sollace," he said, gesturing to a leather chair across from his mahogany desk, "I take it the situation we discussed has reached a tipping point?" "You could say that." I opened the folder I'd prepared, spreading documents across his desk like a construction blueprint. "My wife has been using our joint insurance to pursue fertility treatments with her ex-boyfriend. She informed me of this arrangement this morning over breakfast." Reeves picked up the first document, scanning it with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd read 1,000 similar stories. "These are clinic bills dating back 4 months. Substantial charges. All paid through our joint account. All scheduled on days when she told me she was doing something else." I pointed to a highlighted section. "Notice the consent forms only have her signature." He flipped through several pages, occasionally making notes in the margins. "And you've documented the discrepancies in her stated whereabouts?" Calendar screenshots, text message logs, credit card receipts showing she wasn't where she claimed to be. I pulled out my phone, scrolling to a folder labeled Documentation. I started keeping records 3 months ago when I noticed the pattern. What pattern? Late nights that didn't match her work schedule, weekend trips that didn't include me, phone calls she'd take in another room. I shrugged. I'm in construction. When you see enough small problems, you start looking for the big one causing them. Reeves nodded approvingly. "Most people wait until after the disaster to start gathering evidence. You've been thorough." "I've been careful. There's a difference." He spent the next hour reviewing everything I'd brought, asking pointed questions about dates, amounts, and documentation methods. By the time we finished, I had a clear picture of what came next. "We'll file immediately," Reeves said, closing the folder. "Based on what you've shown me, we can pursue dissolution on grounds of adultery and financial deception. The fertility clinic documentation alone establishes a pattern of deliberate concealment." "How long?" "Maine has a 60-day waiting period for uncontested divorce. If she fights it," he shrugged, "could be longer. But given the evidence, I doubt she'll want this in front of a judge." I shook his hand and left feeling like I'd just signed a contract for the most important construction project of my life. Tearing down a marriage required the same careful planning as building anything worthwhile. You needed the right tools, the proper permits, and a clear understanding of what you were trying to accomplish. My phone buzzed as I reached my truck. 17 missed calls from Cleo, 12 text messages, and 3 voicemails. I deleted them all without reading or listening. Whatever she had to say could wait until her lawyer talked to my lawyer. The construction site where I was supposed to spend my afternoon sat on the outskirts of town, a half-finished office complex that would house a medical practice and 2 law firms when completed. My crew had been framing the second floor for 3 weeks, and we were ahead of schedule despite the usual complications that came with any project involving more than 2 contractors. "Boss," Tommy Castellano waved me over as I climbed out of the truck. "We got a problem with the electrical rough-in. The inspector wants to see you." For the next 4 hours, I lost myself in the familiar rhythm of problem-solving, coordination, and the satisfying work of building something that would last. Construction had always been my refuge. A world where problems had solutions, where effort produced visible results, where trust meant something because people's safety depended on it. By 6 o'clock, the crew had headed home, and I was alone on the site, reviewing tomorrow's schedule and enjoying the quiet satisfaction of a day's work completed. My phone had been buzzing intermittently, but I'd ignored it. Whatever crisis Cleo had manufactured could wait until I was ready to deal with it. The drive home took me through downtown Portland, past the restaurant where Cleo and I had celebrated our first anniversary, past the boutique where she'd bought the dress she wore to my company's Christmas party last year, past all the landmarks of a life I was systematically dismantling. I wasn't angry. Anger was hot, impulsive, destructive. What I felt was colder, more focused. Anger made you do stupid things. What I felt made you do thorough things. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. Cleo's car wasn't in the garage, which meant she'd either found somewhere else to go or figured out how to hotwire the BMW I'd remotely disabled that morning. Either way, I had the place to myself. I walked through rooms that had felt like home 6 hours ago and now felt like a museum of someone else's life. Everything looked the same, but the context had changed. The expensive furniture Cleo had insisted we needed. The artwork she'd chosen without consulting me. The kitchen where she'd casually destroyed our marriage over breakfast. My phone rang. Cleo's ringtone. I answered on the fourth ring. Hello? Jared, thank God. We need to talk. No, we don't. Yes, we do. You're being ridiculous. This whole thing is a misunderstanding. I walked to the kitchen window, looking out at the backyard where we'd planned to build a deck last spring. The grass was patchy where the contractor had marked off measurements that never went anywhere, faded orange paint still faintly visible if you knew where to look. I rested my hand against the glass, feeling the coolness seep into my palm as the weight of unfinished plans pressed in. Which part is the misunderstanding? The part where you used our money to pursue fertility treatments behind my back, or the part where you involved your ex-boyfriend in the process? It's not like that. What's it like, Cleo? Silence stretched between us, thick and deliberate. I could hear distant voices through the line, a car horn, footsteps on pavement, which meant she was calling from somewhere public. Probably her sister's house, or maybe Lila's apartment downtown, anywhere but here. I panicked, she said finally. The doctor said we were having problems, and I didn't know how to tell you. So you decided to tell Derek instead. He offered to help. I'm sure he did. I opened the refrigerator, staring blankly at leftovers and condiments I suddenly had no interest in. The hum of the motor filled the space between her words. Where are you? That doesn't matter. What matters is that we can fix this. We can work through it. No, we can't. Jared, please, don't throw away 6 years over something that can be explained. Explained how? Walk me through the logic. Help me understand how any part of what you did makes sense. Another long pause. I imagined her weighing her words, deciding which version of the truth might land best. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. Less pleading, more calculating, the tone she used when she was bracing for an argument. You're not perfect either, you know. You work 60 hours a week. You never want to go anywhere or do anything. You've been distant for months. Ah. I closed the refrigerator, the seal snapping shut with finality. Whatever appetite I'd had was gone. So this is my fault. I'm not saying it's your fault. I'm saying relationships are complicated. Not this complicated. What do you want from me, Jared? What do I have to do to fix this? Nothing. You can't fix it. It's broken beyond repair. That's not true. Cleo, you made a decision to have another man's baby without telling your husband. You spent months lying to my face about where you were going and what you were doing. You used our joint money to fund a fantasy that didn't include me. I walked to the living room window, looking out at the street where a neighbor's dog barked at nothing in particular. What part of that sounds fixable to you? I can explain everything. I don't want explanations. I want a divorce. The line went quiet. The silence this time felt different. Heavier, hollowed out. Somewhere far off, a siren wailed, probably heading toward downtown Portland where someone else was having the worst day of their life. Jared, Cleo said, her voice barely above a whisper. Please don't do this. I'm not doing anything. You already did it. I ended the call and turned off the phone. The next morning brought 3 developments I should have anticipated, but somehow didn't. First, Cleo had apparently spent the night in our driveway, sleeping in her car because I'd changed the locks and disabled the garage door opener. I discovered this when I left for work at 7 and found her BMW parked behind my truck, blocking me in. Second, she'd called in sick to her design firm and enlisted her sister Michelle as backup, because both of them were standing beside the car when I walked outside with my coffee. Third, she'd decided to escalate. Jared! Cleo climbed out of the driver's seat, looking like she'd slept in her clothes, which technically she had. We need to talk. No, we don't. I walked around her car, checking for damage to my truck's bumper. Move your car, please. He's being completely unreasonable, Cleo said to Michelle, who was standing with her arms crossed and the expression of someone who'd been dragged into a drama she didn't want to be part of. Maybe you should move the car, Michelle suggested. Let him get to work. I'm not moving anything until we have a conversation like adults. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number for Portland Police non-emergency line. I need someone to remove a vehicle that's blocking my driveway. Jared, stop. Cleo grabbed my arm. Please, just give me 5 minutes. You had 6 years of minutes. You used them to lie to me. I'm pregnant. The words hit the morning air like a hammer on glass. I looked at her, really looked, searching her face for some sign that she was telling the truth. Congratulations, I said finally. I hope Derek's excited about becoming a father. It's not Derek's baby, it's yours. I almost laughed. That's interesting, considering the fertility clinic bills suggest otherwise. The treatments didn't work. This happened naturally. When? When what? When did this natural conception occur? Give me dates. Cleo glanced at Michelle, who was staring at the ground like she wished she could disappear into the pavement. I don't know exactly. You don't know when you got pregnant with my baby, but you're certain it's mine and not the guy you've been visiting at fertility clinics for 4 months. It's not like that. What's it like, Cleo? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you realized you're about to lose everything and decided to play the pregnancy card to get me to back down. Michelle cleared her throat. Maybe I should go? No, stay, I said. I want a witness for this. I looked at Cleo. When did you take the pregnancy test? Yesterday. Show me. What? Show me the test. Show me the doctor's confirmation. Show me any evidence that this isn't another lie in a long line of lies. Cleo's face flushed red. I don't have to prove anything to you. Actually, you do. Because if you're pregnant with my child, that changes the legal situation. If you're lying, it's just another manipulation attempt. I scrolled through my phone contacts. Should I call the clinic and ask them to verify your current status? You can't do that. Watch me. I dialed the number listed on the billing statements I'd memorized. After 3 transfers and a 5-minute hold, I reached someone who could access patient records. This is Jared Sollace. My wife Cleo has been a patient of yours, and I need to verify her current pregnancy status for legal proceedings. I'm sorry, sir, but I can't release patient information without proper authorization. I understand. Let me connect you with my attorney, who can explain the legal requirements for verification in divorce proceedings involving fertility treatments. I handed the phone to Cleo. Tell them it's okay to verify whether you're currently pregnant. She stared at the phone like it might bite her. Tell them, Cleo. If you're pregnant, prove it. Michelle stepped forward. Cleo, just tell them. If you're having Jared's baby... I can't. Cleo's voice was barely audible. Why not? Because I'm not pregnant. The morning air went still. Even the traffic noise from the main road seemed to pause. You're not pregnant, I repeated. No. But you said you were. I hoped it would make you stop and think about what you're throwing away. Michelle stared at her sister like she'd never seen her before. Cleo, what the hell is wrong with you? I panicked, okay? He's destroying our marriage over something that doesn't have to be a big deal. Doesn't have to be a big deal. I looked at Michelle. Your sister spent months lying to me about fertility treatments with her ex-boyfriend, used our joint money to fund it, and now she's lying about being pregnant to manipulate me into staying married to her. Does that sound like not a big deal to you? Michelle opened her mouth, closed it, then walked back to her own car. I'm not part of this, she called over her shoulder. Work it out yourselves. She drove away, leaving Cleo and me standing in the driveway with the wreckage of her latest lie scattered between us. Move your car, I said quietly. Jared, move your car, or I'll have it towed. She got behind the wheel without another word. I watched her drive away, then called Mitchell Reeves to update him on the morning's developments. She claimed pregnancy? He asked. For about 10 minutes. Then she admitted it was a lie when I offered to have the clinic verify it. Document everything. Save any text messages or voicemails. If she's willing to lie about pregnancy, she'll lie about other things. Already on it. I hung up and drove to the construction site, where problems had solutions and people generally told the truth about whether walls were straight and foundations were solid. It was a better world than the one I'd left behind in my driveway. But even as I lost myself in the honest work of building something worthwhile, I knew Cleo wasn't finished. The pregnancy lie had been desperate, clumsy, easily disproven. Whatever came next would be more carefully planned. I'd have to be ready for it. The attack came through Instagram at 2:47 p.m. while I was reviewing electrical plans with the site foreman. We were standing in the shade of a half-framed wall, hard hats on, papers spread across the hood of his truck as generators hummed nearby. He was pointing out conduit runs when my phone buzzed in my pocket, sharp and insistent against the steady rhythm of work. I glanced at the screen just long enough to register the notification banner before locking it again. Social media was the last thing I had time for, and definitely the last thing I wanted to deal with on a job site. My phone buzzed with a notification that Cleo had tagged me in a post. I ignored it for an hour, forcing my attention back onto load calculations and timelines, but the knowledge of it sat in the back of my mind like an itch I couldn't quite scratch. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me during my coffee break, when I finally stepped away from the noise and dust and pulled the phone back out. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The post was a masterpiece of calculated manipulation. A photo of our wedding day, both of us smiling at the camera, frozen in a moment that now felt like it belonged to strangers. The caption read, "Sometimes the people we love most are the ones who hurt us deepest. Praying for healing and forgiveness during this difficult time. Marriage is work. Jacques, forgiveness is grace. Jacques, love wins." 43 likes already, including several from my own family members. Familiar names jumped out at me, each one landing like a small betrayal. The comments ranged from supportive, "You're in my prayers," to curious, "What's going on?" to directly accusatory. Some people don't appreciate what they have. Every line was another brick laid in a story I hadn't agreed to tell. I scrolled through the responses, watching my reputation get dissected in real time by people who knew nothing about fertility clinics or ex-boyfriends or lies told over breakfast. They saw a filtered image and a carefully chosen caption and filled in the rest with their own assumptions. In Cleo's version of events, I was the villain, the heartless husband who'd abandoned his loving wife during their difficult time. My phone rang, my mother. "Jared, honey, I saw Cleo's post. What's going on?" "It's complicated, Mom." I already knew how this conversation was going to go, and my jaw tightened as I answered. "She says you moved out?" "I didn't move out. I changed the locks." A beat of stunned silence. "Why would you change the locks on your own wife?" I walked away from the construction site, boots crunching on gravel as I searched for a sliver of privacy to have a conversation I'd been dreading since yesterday morning. "Because she's been lying to me for months about fertility treatments with her ex-boyfriend." Silence on the other end, then, "What?" "She's been using our joint money to pursue having another man's baby. She told me about it yesterday morning like she was discussing the weather." "Jared, that can't be right." "I have the clinic bills, Mom. I have the consent forms with only her signature. I have credit card receipts showing she was lying about where she was going." I rubbed my forehead, feeling a headache building behind my eyes. "She admitted it. She's not denying any of it. But the Instagram post is damage control. She's trying to make me look like the bad guy before people find out what she actually did." Another pause, longer this time. "Honey, are you sure you're not overreacting? Marriage counseling?" "Mom, she tried to have another man's baby without telling me. What part of that sounds like something we can work through in counseling?" "People make mistakes." This wasn't a mistake. This was a months-long deception involving fertility clinics, medical procedures, and thousands of dollars. She made a conscious choice to exclude me from a decision about having children. I could hear my mother struggling with the information, the faint shift of breath on the line as she tried to reconcile the Cleo she thought she knew with the reality I was describing. "What are you going to do?" "I'm getting divorced." "Jared, I have to get back to work, Mom. I'll call you later." I hung up before either of us could say something we couldn't take back, then immediately opened my own Instagram account, which I'd barely used since creating it 3 years ago. The profile felt foreign, like walking into a room I'd never really lived in. If Cleo wanted to play the social media game, I could play too, just not by her rules. I posted a simple message. "Truth has a way of coming out. Looking forward to sharing my side of the story soon. Chaksa document everything. Shirtirant, Acker, truth matters." Then I called Mitchell Reeves. "She's trying to control the narrative," I told him, making me look like the villain on social media. "Expected," he said calmly. "Don't engage directly. Don't post details about the case, but you can defend yourself generally." "What about the fertility clinic documentation? Can I share that?" "Absolutely not. Medical records are private even if she's the patient. We'll present everything in court, but social media isn't the place for evidence." "So I just let her trash my reputation?" "You let her dig her own grave. Every post she makes can be used to demonstrate her mindset and behavior patterns. The more she lies publicly, the worse she looks when the truth comes out." After work, I drove home to find Cleo's car in the driveway again. My stomach tightened as I pulled in. This time, she wasn't alone. Lila Morrison, her best friend since college, was sitting on my front porch steps like she owned the place, arms crossed, expression already set for confrontation. "Jared," Lila stood as I approached. "We need to talk." "No, we don't." "Cleo told me what's happening. This is crazy. You can't just throw away your marriage over a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" I unlocked my front door, not inviting either of them inside. "Is that what we're calling it?" "She was trying to help your fertility issues. By having her ex-boyfriend's baby?" Lila's confident expression faltered slightly. "That's not..." She said you couldn't have children, so she found a donor. Without telling me. Using our joint money. Lying about where she was going and what she was doing. I stepped into my house, turning back to face them. Would you be okay with your husband doing that? It's different. How? She was trying to give you a family. She was trying to have Derek Walsh's baby and pass it off as mine. There's a difference. Cleo finally spoke up from behind Lila. That's not true. I would have told you. When? After the baby was born? After I'd been paying for prenatal care for 9 months? After I'd bonded with a child that wasn't mine? I shook my head. You had 4 months to tell me. You chose not to. I was scared. Of what? Of this. Of you reacting exactly like you're reacting. You mean honestly? Lila stepped between us. Look, everyone's emotions are running high. Why don't you both take some time to cool down? I am cool. I'm also done. I started to close the door, then paused. Lila, you might want to ask Cleo about the pregnancy she claimed yesterday morning, and then ask her about the phone call to the fertility clinic where she admitted it was a lie. I closed the door and locked it, leaving them standing on the porch. Through the window, I watched Lila turn to Cleo with a confused expression. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I could see Cleo's face getting redder as she tried to explain. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Derek. We need to talk. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. No, we don't. This affects me too. Should have thought of that before you decided to help my wife have your baby. Meet me at Murphy's bar, 1 hour. I deleted the conversation without responding. Derek Walsh could wait indefinitely for a conversation that was never going to happen. But as I watched Cleo and Lila argue on my front porch, I realized the social media post had been just the opening move. If Derek was reaching out directly, it meant they were coordinating their response. Whatever came next would be more sophisticated than fake pregnancy claims and Instagram manipulation. I needed to be ready. Murphy's bar sat on the corner of Exchange and Federal Streets, the kind of place where construction workers, dock workers, and various other people who worked with their hands gathered after long days to complain about supervisors, weather, and wives who didn't understand that some problems couldn't be solved with conversation. I hadn't planned to meet Derek Walsh. I'd planned to go home, eat dinner, and review the divorce paperwork Mitchell Reeves had prepared. But at 6:30, my phone rang with a call from Tommy Castellano. Boss, you need to get down to Murphy's. That guy Derek is here running his mouth about you. What's he saying? Nothing good. Claims you're some kind of control freak who won't let your wife make her own decisions. Says you froze her out of her own money over a misunderstanding. I closed my eyes, feeling the day's tension settle into my shoulders. How many people are listening? Half the bar. He's buying rounds, making friends, telling everyone who'll listen that you're the bad guy in this situation. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Murphy's was crowded for a Thursday night, filled with the usual mix of regulars and downtown workers grabbing dinner before heading home to families who might or might not be happy to see them. I spotted Derek immediately. He was holding court at the far end of the bar, gesturing dramatically while 3 guys I recognized from various job sites listened with the polite attention of people enjoying free drinks. He saw me coming and smiled like he'd been expecting me. Jared, great to see you, man. I was just telling these guys about the situation with Cleo. Were you? I signaled the bartender for a beer, keeping my voice level and my hands visible. Murphy's had rules about fighting, and I wasn't interested in getting banned from the one place in town where I could drink in peace. Yeah, it's a shame when marriages fall apart over communication issues. Derek took a long pull from his bottle, playing to his audience. I mean, when a woman asks for help having a baby, you'd think her husband would be supportive. The 3 guys looked between us like spectators at a tennis match. I recognized Bill Morrison from Electrical Crew and Jake Santos from the plumbing contractor we used on most commercial jobs. The 3rd guy was unfamiliar, probably someone Derek had met 5 minutes ago. Help having a baby, I repeated. Is that what you call it? What would you call it? Adultery, deception, fraud. I took a sip of beer, letting the words settle. But I'm not a wordsmith. Maybe you have better terminology. Derek's smile flickered. Look, I know you're upset. I'm not upset. Upset implies emotion. I'm just cleaning up a mess. Cleo's not a mess. Cleo's a woman who spent 4 months lying to her husband about fertility treatments with her ex-boyfriend. She used our joint money to fund procedures I knew nothing about, signed consent forms without my knowledge, and told me about it like she was discussing the weather. I looked at the 3 guys who were listening with increasing interest. Does that sound like a communication issue to you? Bill Morrison whistled low. She really did that? I have the clinic bills, I have the consent forms, I have credit card receipts showing she was lying about where she was going. I pulled out my phone, scrolling to a folder of screenshots. Want to see the documentation? That's private medical information, Derek started. That was paid for with my money, involving my wife, affecting my marriage. I showed Bill the billing statements. 4 months of charges. Thousands of dollars. All scheduled on days when she told me she was doing something else. Jake Santos leaned over to look at the phone screen. Holy crap! She really was seeing this guy behind your back? Seeing him, planning to have his baby, lying about it for months. I put the phone away. But Derek here thinks it's a communication issue. The unfamiliar guy looked at Derek with new interest. Dude, you were helping a married woman have your baby? It's not like that. What's it like? I asked. Walk us through the logic. Help us understand how any part of this makes sense. Derek's face was getting red. You don't understand the whole situation. Then explain it. You're the one who wanted to talk. Privately. No. You made this public when you started buying drinks and telling stories. Now you can explain publicly. I gestured to the bartender. Round for these guys. Put it on my tab. The bartender, a guy named Sean who'd been working Murphy's for 15 years, poured fresh drinks and settled in to listen. Word was spreading through the bar that something interesting was happening. Cleo came to me for help, Derek said, his voice getting defensive. She was having fertility issues. We were having fertility issues, both of us, together, as a married couple. She said you weren't interested in treatment. She never asked me about treatment. She never told me she was pursuing treatment. She never mentioned that treatment involved you. I looked around the growing crowd. Show of hands. How many of you would be okay with your wife doing that? No hands went up. How many of you would consider that grounds for divorce? Every hand in sight went up. Derek was looking increasingly uncomfortable. Look, this is between you and Cleo? No, it's between me and my lawyer now. You're just a footnote in the paperwork. She loves you, man. She's trying to save your marriage. By lying about being pregnant yesterday morning, the crowd murmured. Derek's eyes went wide. Oh, she didn't tell you about that part? I smiled for the first time all day. Yesterday, she claimed to be pregnant with my baby, begged me to stop the divorce proceedings. When I offered to have the fertility clinic verify her pregnancy status, she admitted it was a lie. She's not pregnant? Derek asked. Nope. Just another manipulation attempt. I finished my beer and put money on the bar. But hey, maybe you two can try again. I hear fertility clinics are very discreet about their services. I walked toward the door, then turned back. Derek, next time you want to have a conversation about my marriage, maybe start by being honest about your role in destroying it. The bar was completely quiet as I left. Behind me, I could hear Derek trying to explain himself to an audience that was no longer buying drinks or listening with polite attention. My phone buzzed as I reached my truck. A text from Tommy. That was beautiful, boss. Drinks are on me tomorrow. Then another text from a number I didn't recognize. You're going to regret this. Cleo. I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Whatever Cleo thought I was going to regret, it couldn't be worse than 6 years of marriage to someone who thought lying was a communication style. But as I drove home through the quiet streets of Portland, I couldn't shake the feeling that the bar confrontation had been too easy. Derek had folded too quickly, and Cleo's threatening text suggested she had backup plans I hadn't considered. The real fight was just beginning. The ambush came on Saturday morning, perfectly timed for maximum impact and minimum escape routes. I was having coffee on my back deck, reviewing construction schedules and enjoying the first peaceful morning I'd had since discovering the fertility clinic bills when the doorbell rang, then rang again. Then someone started pounding on the front door like the house was on fire. Through the front window, I could see Cleo's sister, Michelle, Cleo herself, and 2 people I didn't immediately recognize. A woman about Cleo's age and an older man in an expensive suit. I opened the door to find Cleo's entire family intervention team assembled on my porch like they were selling religion or running for office. They stood in a loose semicircle, blocking the steps and the walkway, faces set with practiced concern. It was still early enough that the air carried the sharpness of morning, and I could feel eyes from neighboring houses flicking toward us, drawn by the tension more than the noise. Cleo's sister was front and center, shoulders squared, like this was a confrontation she'd rehearsed. "We need to talk," Michelle announced. "No, we don't." "Yes, we do." The older man stepped forward, extending his hand. His smile was calm and professional, the kind meant to lower defenses. "Robert Marchetti, family counselor. Cleo's parents asked me to mediate this situation." I didn't take his hand. I looked past him to Cleo, who was standing behind her sister with red-rimmed eyes and the kind of pale, fragile appearance that suggested she'd been crying strategically for maximum effect. Her posture was small, almost folded inward, as if she were already the injured party. "There's nothing to mediate," I said. "I'm getting divorced." "Mr. Sollace," the counselor continued smoothly, as if I hadn't spoken, "I understand you're hurt and angry, but ending a 6-year marriage without attempting reconciliation, I'm not hurt or angry. I'm done." I started to close the door, already feeling the familiar drain of energy that came with explaining the obvious. "This conversation is over. Jared, please." Cleo spoke for the first time, her voice barely above a whisper, carefully fragile. "Just give me one chance to explain everything." "You had months to explain. You chose to lie instead." "I was scared?" "Of what?" I asked. "Of me finding out you were trying to have another man's baby?" A few of them shifted uncomfortably. The counselor cleared his throat, stepping slightly to the side like he was trying to regain control of the scene. "Perhaps we could discuss this inside, away from the neighbors. The neighbors already know. Half the town knows after Derek's performance at Murphy's bar Thursday night." I looked directly at Cleo. "Did you tell Mr. Marchetti about the fake pregnancy claim? Or just the parts that make me look unreasonable?" Michelle stepped forward, her tone sharpening. "She told us everything. About the fertility treatments, about Derek, about the pregnancy confusion." "Confusion?" I almost laughed, the sound coming out harsher than I intended. "She looked me in the eye and claimed to be pregnant with my baby, then admitted it was a lie when I offered to verify it. That's not confusion. That's calculated manipulation." "People make mistakes when they are desperate," the counselor began, lifting a placating hand. "This wasn't a mistake. This was a months-long pattern of deception involving medical procedures, thousands of dollars, and another man." I looked at each of them in turn, letting the words hang. "Would any of you be okay with your spouse doing that?" The unfamiliar woman, who I now realized was probably Cleo's mother, spoke up for the first time, her voice tight with strain. "Marriage requires forgiveness. Marriage requires honesty. Your daughter chose dishonesty." I pulled out my phone, my thumb already knowing where to go, scrolling to the documentation folder. "Want to see the fertility clinic bills? The consent forms with only her signature? The credit card receipts proving she lied about where she was going?" "We don't need to see," Michelle started, her confidence faltering. "Yes, you do, because you came here to convince me I'm being unreasonable, and I want you to understand exactly what you're asking me to forgive." I held the phone up so they could all see the screen. 4 months of treatments, $8,000, dozens of lies about her whereabouts, all leading up to her planning to have Derek Walsh's baby and pass it off as mine. Cleo's mother went pale. The counselor looked uncomfortable. Michelle stared at the phone like it might bite her. "She never intended to deceive you about paternity," the counselor said weakly. "Really? Then why didn't she tell me? Why lie about where she was going? Why sign consent forms without my knowledge?" I put the phone away. What exactly was the plan? Have Derek's baby and hope I wouldn't notice? "She was going to tell you?" "When? After the baby was born? After I'd paid for 9 months of prenatal care? After I'd bonded with a child that wasn't mine?" Cleo finally looked up, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't know how to tell you. I was scared you'd react exactly like this." "You mean honestly?" "I mean angrily. I mean without trying to understand." "Understand what?" "Help me understand how any part of this makes sense." "We were having problems getting pregnant. The doctor said it might be your issue. Derek offered to help. Derek offered to have a baby with you. There's a difference. It wasn't supposed to be romantic. It was supposed to be secret. That's the problem." I looked at the assembled intervention team. "She made a unilateral decision about having children, excluded me from the process, lied about it for months, and now wants me to understand and forgive. Does that sound reasonable to any of you?" The counselor tried one more time. "Mr. Sollace, I've seen many marriages recover from infidelity. This wasn't infidelity. This was fraud. She used our joint money to pursue having another man's baby without my knowledge or consent. She planned to deceive me about paternity. She lied about being pregnant to manipulate me into stopping divorce proceedings." I opened the front door wider. "This conversation is over." "Jared," Cleo started. "Cleo, you made your choice 4 months ago when you decided Derek was a better partner for having children than your husband. I'm making my choice now." I closed the door and locked it, leaving them standing on the porch. Through the window, I watched the counselor try to manage the aftermath of his failed intervention, while Cleo's family struggled to process what they'd learned. My phone rang immediately. Mitchell Reeves. "I just got an interesting call," he said. "Cleo's retained an attorney." Good. Maybe now we can move forward without family interventions and fake pregnancy claims. Her lawyer wants to meet, discuss settlement terms. What kind of terms? Spousal support, property division, the usual. But there's something else. She's claiming you were emotionally abusive, says you controlled her finances and isolated her from friends. I walked to the kitchen window, watching Cleo's intervention team argue in my driveway. She's claiming I was abusive because I discovered her lies and froze our joint accounts? That's the angle. Financial abuse, emotional manipulation, creating an environment where she felt she couldn't be honest about her fertility concerns. Can she make that stick? Not with the documentation you've provided. The fertility clinic bills, the consent forms, the credit card receipts. All of that establishes a pattern of deception on her part. But she's going to try to muddy the waters. Make this about your reaction rather than her actions. What do you recommend? We proceed exactly as planned. File for dissolution on grounds of adultery and deception. Let her lawyer explain to a judge why fertility treatments with an ex-boyfriend constitute reasonable marital behavior. I hung up and watched Cleo's family finally leave my driveway. The counselor looked defeated, Michelle looked angry, and Cleo looked like someone who'd just realized her last strategy had failed. But as I reviewed the morning's events, I realized something important had happened. For the first time since this started, Cleo had been forced to tell her family the complete truth. No more partial explanations or strategic omissions. They'd heard about Derek, the fertility treatments, the lies, and the fake pregnancy claim. Whatever support system she'd been counting on had just learned exactly what kind of person they were being asked to support. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You won. Are you happy now? I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, I didn't win anything. You lost it. Then I deleted the conversation and went back to my coffee and construction schedules, surrounded by the quiet satisfaction of a house that was finally honest about who lived there. The divorce would take 60 days to finalize, but the marriage had ended the moment Cleo decided Derek Walsh was a better partner for having children than the man she'd promised to love, honor, and be honest with. Everything else was just paperwork.